As many of you may have observed, the concept of masculinity feels as if it's under attack. On today's episode of the Johnny Lawrence podcast, I'd like to offer my definition and breakdown of masculinity. And the reason I want to do this is because it feels like this attack, and I'm aware of how aggressive that word is, but for many, that's how it feels. I feel this attack on masculinity has become part of the problem, in a sense, as everyone is very, very vocal about what is not acceptable behavior. And being honest with you, in many cases, I completely agree. There is absolutely no room for misogyny, for violence towards women, for misplaced aggression, or any other hate-fueled pursuit or behavior. However, who's telling, teaching, or showing our young men how to be masculine? Today, I'll offer, not tell, but offer my thoughts on masculinity. You see, like many of us, I recently watched the Netflix show Adolescence. And it really hit me hard, actually. It stayed with me, the undertones, the sort of background message. And although I'm not going to discuss the show, I think I will be doing that with a guest in the coming weeks. I'm not going to be talking about the ins and outs of the show, so there's no need for spoiler alerts. The underlying message, that the worry and concern I have as a father of two boys and as somebody that grew up in domestic violence and saw how it can affect you when you've had a violent dad, an absent father, and all of those things. So not getting that guidance as a young man meant that life was just a lot harder than it needed to be for me very early on. So what did I do about this? Well, as I do with everything, I channeled it into my creativity and I wrote an article called What is Masculinity? Or at least that was what it was going to be called at the time of this recording. So today I'm going to go through the article, and my intention at this time of recording is to release the article on the same day as I release this podcast. And I'm just going to walk through it because I genuinely think that this is a very, very important topic. And I just want to make it clear from the beginning, I'm not saying that this is what masculinity is. I'm really exploring it because I think it's a really interesting question. I think it's a really hard target for young men to hit when they don't know what it is, when it's not well defined. So what am I doing here? I'm exploring, I'm being curious, I'm opening a debate. I'm not claiming to have the answers, but I do feel that I've looked at the definitions that I could find of masculinity. I've looked at different points of view, ones that have a very, spiritual, emotional way of looking at masculinity, and then I've looked at other ones that are very much a social construct and maybe come from a different perspective that might not be quite so helpful. You're like, what does that mean? But yeah, so I'm going to offer my thoughts, and really more as a place to start than anything else. And as part of the article, I came up with sort of 10 traits, I think, of what I feel masculinity is. And I'm going to be doing a lot of reading from my article today, and then exploring it a little bit further. We're going to try and keep this under the 20-minute mark. We'll see. Feels quite difficult considering we're already on 4 minutes. So let's see what happens. But anyway, I'm going to start by explaining what masculinity is, or at least my perception of what masculinity is. So I wrote, masculinity is a set of traits, behaviors, and roles that society traditionally associates with being male. It can be understood differently depending on culture, time period, and personal beliefs. Historically, masculinity has been linked to qualities like strength, dominance, stoicism, but in modern discussions, it increasingly gets recognized as a broad and evolving concept. At its core, masculinity isn't just about physical traits or toughness. It can also include emotional intelligence, responsibility, leadership, compassion, and resilience. The challenge is that outdated ideas of masculinity sometimes discourage men from expressing vulnerability or seeking help, leading to struggles with mental health, relationships, and self-identity. A healthier view of masculinity embraces a balance allowing men to be strong and assertive while being emotionally aware and open. In today's world, masculinity isn't about fitting into a rigid mold. It's about being true to oneself without fearing judgment or expectation. I've spent a lot of time wording that because I wanted to cover all bases, because there does seem to be this culture these days where people can't have open debates, people can't explore things. And I've said it before in this podcast, I honestly do only have one pursuit, and that is I'm looking for what is true. I'm not looking to be right or wrong. I'm not looking to be heralded as someone who's got all the answers. I don't know if I'd want that position, to be honest. I'm looking for what's true, and I'm concerned about young men. Obviously, at one point I was a young man, and I remember very vividly, and it gets stirred up now as I'm watching my sons get into their teenage years and their hormones are coming in and they're starting to have trouble understanding the world. And I never grew up with social media, so I don't have those pressures, but I do think having social media as a young person now is a terrifying idea. I think back to my childhood, and I include social media in that, and camera phones, and I think, wow, I definitely would have been held to some silly mistakes I made as a kid. So, I really do feel strongly that masculinity is about having that embrace of that struggle, that knife edge ridge between being strong, whatever that means. Sometimes that means assertive, sometimes that means physically strong, but also it means, to me, is straddling that border between that strength and that emotional awareness. And that's the part for me that's super important, as you have lots of people these days, unfortunately, online that are hijacking masculinity, and they are selling their version of masculinity for their own means, by the way, to cash in, to benefit from it. And at the same time, you have some people who are pushing views onto young men in a shameful way, shaming them instead of teaching them, telling them that this is not the way they should behave, that they're wrong, that they're bad, when actually they may or may not know a better way. Now, again, I'm not glorifying anything, I'm not justifying anything. I'm just saying there's a misunderstanding here, and we need to understand what it is. And I feel that it would be more beneficial for young men to be shown what masculinity is instead of ridiculed and shamed for what masculinity isn't. Again, fully agree. There's no room for misogyny. Certainly no room for violence against any women. Having grown up in domestic violence, I've seen my fair share of that. And I was brought up by my mother. And I have a very, I don't know, I don't like to say feminine way of looking at masculinity, but I think I have an open way of looking at it. I have a way of understanding it from all perspectives. There's been a lot of conflict in some of the ways that I've looked at men in the past, and there's been a lot of embracing. I was looking for a father figure, a role model, which led me down some bad paths sometimes, because there are some people out there that take advantage of you. But men, just like women, just like any human, are flawed. We're all flawed. This is the thing that we have to understand, is that we are all flawed as human beings. So I'm going to go through it now because I was on the risk of ranting there. I think I probably did, to be fair. But the first one that I want to point out is integrity. Being true to your values. And what I've written here is integrity is about honesty, strong moral principles, and staying true to one's values, even when difficult. In modern masculinity, integrity is essential because it reflects a man's ability to lead by example, take accountability for his actions, and build trust in personal and professional relationships. A man with integrity does what is right, even when no one is watching. Yeah, I really love what I've written there. That's so terrible to say out loud, but I do, because it's what I mean to say. Integrity, being a man of your word, being on time when you say you're going to be on time, doing what you say you're going to do, standing by yourself, building trust with yourself, building a good reputation with yourself, but in turn with others as well. Being that person that you know that you can be relied upon. One of the things that I take great pride in is we were having a little chat around the dinner table, me and my family, and we were like trying to describe each other in one word. And honestly, this really made me cry when they said it. They said, my son said, protection, protector, you protect us. And that's what I aim to be really in life, is a protector. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to be this big, strong hero standing behind people, that I know anything that anyone else doesn't, and that I'm better than anyone. What it means is that I like being the person in people's lives that when I'm standing behind them, they feel like they can instead of they can't. And to know that I'm that for my sons, that means the world to me. And I know that I'm that for some of my clients. I know that I'm that for my family members and my friends, and of course, my wife. That makes me really happy. And that's integrity. It's about really knowing that when I go into a room, that I mean what I say, and that I am there to really be true to my values and just be there for people and help and be helpful, be somebody that is seen, that when I go in this life, that people will say, hopefully say kind things about me, have integrity, be true to your values. Second one I wrote is bravery, facing challenges with courage. Now, there's a quote that I'm sure you all know that I love. I've said it a million times, boring. And that is the quote by Muhammad Ali: "You cannot be brave without fear." So bravery to me is not about being some sort of hero. It's not about being big and strong as such. It's about facing challenges with courage. I've written bravery in today's world is not just about physical courage, but also about emotional and moral courage. It's about standing up for what's right, speaking out against injustice, and being vulnerable in the face of fear or uncertainty. A modern masculine man isn't afraid to show emotions, seek help when needed, or challenge outdated stereotypes that suppress emotional expression. Here's the thing, in most cases, it takes so much more courage, so much more bravery to say when you are not feeling strong, to say when you are having trouble, to say, listen, I'm not okay. I need help. Help me. That takes far more courage than bottling it all up, allowing it to become anger, which then can have a direct route and path to rage, which is anger that's become violent and out of control. And then you're labeled this angry, violent person. So guess what? That's what you become. For men these days, there's so much anger and frustration. For women these days, there's so much anger and frustration. To be a human being living on planet Earth, there is a lot of anger and frustration. But I'm talking about men now, and it's so much more braver. You are so much more courageous. You are so much more masculine when you are aware of your emotions, when you ask for help, when you seek help, when you admit that you are not okay and you do not suppress that anger. Because, see, suppressing your anger goes one of two ways. If you suppress it inwardly, it becomes depression. If you suppress it outwardly, it becomes rage. So we have to be able to communicate. We have to be able to be brave enough to admit that we are not okay. It is not weak to be vulnerable. It's not weak to be vulnerable. It's being brave, because it's the one thing you don't want anyone to know, that you are not feeling okay. Number 3, responsibility. Owning your actions and choices. We are stuck in our culture these days. We blame a lot. I watched on the news the other day as the Heathrow fire happened, and it literally had only just happened. And the newscasters were already wondering who's to blame and what the failings were of certain people in the situation, which I know is important, but it's not the first point of call. Are people okay? How are people going to manage this catastrophe? How are people going to travel? All of these things going on, and yet we're talking about blame. So what I've written here is, being responsible means owning one's actions, decisions, and impact on others. Modern masculinity embraces responsibility in all aspects of life, family, work, relationships, and self-care. A responsible man doesn't blame others for his shortcomings. He learns from his mistakes, supports those around him, and contributes positively to his community. Instead of worrying about whose fault it is that you're not able to do what you're doing or whatever's going on in your life, take responsibility for it. Take accountability for it. Own it. Step up. Don't blame others for things that are going on in your life. Just take the lessons and learn, and ditch the anger and the blame. Blame is a trap, because it's only going to end in resentment and anger, which is going to end up coming back to blame. And if you can't blame other people, you're going to blame yourself, and you're going to end up going down the well of that. And that's going to be difficult to come out of. So really, it's about understanding the impact, taking responsibility, owning your actions and choices. You did it. And maybe you did it because someone else did something else, but you still chose it. It was still a choice. It may not have felt like one. So it's about responsibility. And that translates into so many things. It translates into being a parent, whether it was intended or not, saying, okay, I'm going to take responsibility for my family, for my children, whether or not you're in a relationship or not. I'm going to take responsibility for something that happens at work. I'm going to take responsibility for the things that need doing. taking the bin out, whatever it is, So that's another one, I feel. That's number 3, responsibility. Next one is compassion, balancing strength with empathy. And it is a balance. It is a balance because sometimes things need to be said and there's only one way to say them, but sometimes they don't need to be said quite the way they are said, if that makes any sense. Compassion is the ability to understand and share the feelings of others. In a world where traditional masculinity often discourages emotional connection, modern masculinity embraces compassion as a strength. Whether it's friendship, parenting, or leadership, a compassionate man fosters trust, respect, and meaningful relationships. It's those two words, trust and respect. It's being the kind of person that people have learned from your actions, by watching you, by the things that you've done, by your history, that you are someone that can be trusted, that you are someone of value, that you are somebody that when you're there, they feel, yeah, that's great. I've got friends that when things go wrong, they call me, and I'm really proud of that as a trait. I've worked on that. I've put all the time in. I've earned that trust. I've earned it. And with trust comes respect. Respect is earned. There's so many people that think because they have a certain job or they have a certain amount of money or they have a certain amount of social media followers that they are instantly to be respected. But respect in all cases is always earned. And then it takes a little bit of keeping as well. You've got to keep being that person. You've got to have that consistency. So compassion and empathy is about really understanding what it's like to be that person so that you then can help them. Instead of coming at them with judgment and flicking shame at them and telling them that they've done wrong, as a man, I like to believe it's our jobs to show people our strength, to give them that reassurance, to give them that support and encouragement, but also to be empathetic to a young man who doesn't know about the world yet. He doesn't know things yet. He needs that help. He needs that guidance. One of the scenes from the adolescent show where the kid experienced a real disappointment and he turned to his dad for guidance, and his dad wasn't able to help him with that emotion and turned away. And what that kid then potentially does is he makes sense of that emotion himself. He's 12, he's 13 years old, whatever age he is. How's he supposed to have the life experience to be able to make sense of that disappointment? So he's going to internalize it into his self-worth. I'm not good enough. I can't do this. I'm worthless. And then that's going to translate into all other areas of his life, all because the father wasn't able to turn around and say, son, in life, we have disappointments. It doesn't mean that you're a disappointment. It means something disappointing has happened. And we're allowed to experience that emotion, and let's do it together. But then when we've experienced that emotion and we're satisfied with what it means and the meaning that we've applied to it, let's have a look at what we can do next. Just an example, perhaps, and that's not to say that I've got it right every time with my sons. I've definitely said stuff that I've had to apologize for later. That's being human. And this is the thing. Being a man is not about being perfect. It's about the effort we put in. It's about keep trying, keep failing, keep winning, but from both, learning what we need to know in order to be a better man and to keep showing up and to keep being a good role model for our younger men, whether they're related to us or not. Emotional intelligence. Now, I've spoken a lot about this on other episodes, but as a snapshot, understanding and managing emotions. Emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize, understand, and regulate emotions in oneself and others. Modern masculinity values emotional intelligence because it allows men to communicate effectively, build deeper relationships, and navigate challenges without resorting to aggression or emotional suppression. A man with emotional intelligence is self-aware, adaptable, and capable of handling stress and conflict in a healthy way. And this is the thing, isn't it? We're talking about that aggression and that suppression again. That either I'm going to be outwardly angry and rageful and throw things and be out of control and say things I don't mean and hurt people with my words or my actions, or I'm going to suppress it all and I'm going to go inward and I'm going to brood and I'm going to start being my own counsel and coming up with all these out there ideas based on fear and resentment and all these negative emotions. This is why it's important for us to be vulnerable. It's the key to it all. Be vulnerable, to turn around to the people that we can trust and love and say, I'm not okay, I need help, I need to make sense of this feeling I'm having. Most of the time, we don't even know what that feeling is. So how are we supposed to make sense of it? Resilience, bouncing back from adversity. Resilience is the ability to recover from setbacks, learn from failures, and keep moving forward. Modern masculinity recognizes that struggles and failures are part of life, and true strength comes from perseverance, adaptability, and a resilient man doesn't avoid difficulties. He faces them, learns from them, and grows. Really, really easy to say, extremely hard to do. But for me, it's about being willing to face your fears, to make mistakes, and to embrace that disappointment perhaps of making a mistake or things not going the way you hoped based on your expectations, but then being able to take something from it, learn from it, be resilient. It's like collecting a toolbox for life, being able to say, hey, I tried this thing and it didn't work. In fact, it went really wrong and I was really embarrassed, or I was really ashamed, or I was really some sort of other, I felt inadequate. No one wants to feel inadequate, but being able to take the meaning from it. I went to the top of a mountain. I failed. I didn't get to the top, but the world didn't come to an end and no one called me a failure. I failed, but that doesn't make me a failure. It makes me resilient. I had the most incredible experience from that whole thing. I met some incredible people, and that's what I take from that situation. That's what I learned. It was worth doing for that. So resilience is bouncing back from adversity. Number 7, humility, knowing you don't have to have all the answers. Man, that changed me as a coach, realizing that my job wasn't to be Yoda and have all the answers for people. My job was to sit and listen and to help them find the answers for themselves, to why they explored difficult topics, difficult things that they knew were true about themselves, that I was there to support them with no judgment. I could reflect back to them that it was okay that you made a mistake, or it was okay that things didn't work out the way that you wanted them to. That's helpful, So humility is about recognizing that humans are imperfect. We are not perfect, and we shouldn't try to be, because perfection is impossible. It's impossible. So what are we doing here? Why are we aiming for the impossible? Doesn't make sense. Let's stop doing that. And it must be open. We must be open to learning and growth. A modern masculine man understands that leadership isn't about being the loudest or most dominant voice. It's about listening, admitting when he's wrong, and constantly evolving. This is something that I like about myself, is that I admit when I'm wrong. Like I say, I'm not here to be wrong or right. I'm here to find the truth. And I make sure of it, in fact, that when I'm wrong, that I say to my kids, I was wrong. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. Whatever it is that needs to be said. And actually the relief that comes with that, the dread that comes with it before, totally get it. You don't want to, your pride steps in, your ego steps in. But when you admit it and then you see that relief in their face, those young men, to say, hey, it's okay to make mistakes. Look, I've just made a mistake. And you don't hate me, right? I hope. So, and again, I am not saying that I do all of these things. Please do not think I'm saying that. This is not a scolding. This is not a listen, do as Johnny says. I'm not saying that. I make mistakes all the time. I'm totally saying that in this, that I am imperfect. I am totally imperfect. I make mistakes all the time. But these are things that I aspire to every day. Some of them I succeed at. A lot of the time I fail. But I'm going to keep trying. It's the effort. Remember, it's the effort that we put in. Self-awareness. Knowing who you are and what you stand for. Yeah, this is your values again. This is being self-aware. We've all met the person in the room and we're like, wow, really? That's what you're going to say and do? That's the way you're going to act? Even though someone's upset, even though someone's clearly not listening or they're angry, you're still going to do that thing? We've all met that person. Self-awareness is the foundation of personal growth. A man who understands his strengths, weaknesses, emotions, and values is better equipped to make meaningful decisions, build strong relationships, and live authentically. Being self-aware, being aware of who you are and how you are in all situations, knowing when to speak, knowing when not to speak, knowing when to act, knowing when to allow others to act. It's important. Self-awareness is important. And as men, we need to think about the things that we say, the things that we do, and the way they might make other people feel. Leadership. Leading with integrity and purpose. Leadership in modern masculinity isn't about control or dominance. It's about inspiring and supporting others. Authentic leadership comes from guiding others with respect, vision, and encouragement, whether at work, in relationships, or within community. Again, this thing about leadership, a lot of people think that I'm talking about people being this dominant, controlling person. In fact, it's being able to, when I do mountain walks and stuff, sometimes I take the lead and people go, okay, so you're the leading, but you're standing at the back. It's because I like to allow people to do things for themselves. I like to allow people to find their way to walk forward through this mountain, to allow themselves to stop and go, hang on a minute, am I going the right way? To question themselves, to have all of that freedom instead of me leading them to the top and saying, right, because then they can't take any accountability. They've just followed me to the top of a hill, whereas I think it's much better for people to be led by allowing them to discover themselves, to allowing them to find their strengths, to find their weaknesses. And for me to go, yeah, that was amazing when you did that. Hey, listen, maybe we could have done this differently. That's leadership in my eyes, and any man or woman or any person can be a leader. Anyone can. But the problem we have is this masculinity is shown sometimes to men as dominance, as to be better than. And I'm not sure that's that helpful. Last one, open-mindedness, challenging old ideas and growing. Modern masculinity is about being open to new ideas, perspectives, and ways of thinking. An open-minded man is willing to challenge outdated roles, engage in meaningful conversations, and grow beyond societal expectations. You're not always right, fellas. You're not always right. You might have preferences and you might have ways of doing things, and they might work for you, but they're not for everybody. You can't be angry at somebody. You can't scold somebody because they are not doing you. They're not doing your preferences, because that's all they are. It's about being open-minded. It's about being able to adapt. It's about showing people that you're willing to try different things in different ways. Being open-minded, challenging old ideas and growing. The world evolves, and if you don't evolve with it, then you get left behind. And that's where the resentment starts to build up. Right, where are we at? Oh, almost half an hour. Totally failed. See, failed again. Didn't make it in 20 minutes. But I'm just going to finish off by reading what I wrote on the article. Modern masculinity isn't about fitting into predefined roles. It's about being a well-rounded, emotionally intelligent, and purpose-driven individual. It embraces both strength and vulnerability, confidence and humility, ambition and compassion. The men who embody these traits are redefining masculinity for future generations, showing that true strength comes from authenticity, integrity, and emotional depth. And what's important here is that we have to practice this. We get it wrong, and that's okay. We just have to be open-minded and adaptable to looking at our mistakes. But what's important here, in my opinion, is the effort that we put in as men to show that we are trying to be better, to show that we are trying to be the people we want to be, to aspire to our values. Like I said, it's embracing both strength and vulnerability, confidence and humility, ambition and compassion. They contradict each other in some way. But that's life. Life is a contradiction a lot of the time. And that's why we have to be adaptable. Thank you for listening. I'm not going to waffle on and take up your time anymore, but it's just been something that's been very, very important to me. I'd love to know your thoughts. Please, please, please support the podcast, subscribe, share, open debates, ask questions. Let's get out there and get this conversation had. Check out the website, johnnylawrence.co.uk. Check out the Slavery of Addiction documentary. And in the next episode, I plan to be exploring what toxic masculinity is and the challenges that it presents. So please tune in next week for that. And thank you for listening, and I will see you next week.